The school hallways had quieted down long ago, long after the final bell had rung and backpacks had disappeared into the arms of waiting parents. But the janitor's closet light was still on, humming quietly in the shadows of a building that had fallen mostly silent. No one usually noticed the janitor, a quiet man named Alex, and he didn't mind that. In fact, he preferred it. He'd grown used to the background. The mop, the broom, the smell of cleaning fluid. All familiar things in a world that rarely offered stability. But on this particular rainy Tuesday, something happened that would pull him from the edges and place him squarely in the center of something far bigger than he could have ever imagined. Alex was in the gym, putting away a cart of basketballs when he heard it. Not the usual echo of kids laughing or sneakers squeaking, but a muffled sound like someone trying not to cry. He paused, frowning, wiping his hands on his coveralls. The sound was coming from behind the bleachers, where light barely reached. He approached slowly, gently pushing a loose panel aside, and there she was. A little girl, maybe 8 or 9, sat huddled with her arms wrapped tightly around her knees, her face hidden. Her tiny shoulders shook, and her soft sobs filled the quiet space. She didn't look up when Alex crouched a few feet away. He didn't ask her what was wrong right away. He just sat there quietly, letting her know he wasn't going to rush her or judge her. He'd been a dad long enough to know sometimes kids just needed space before they could find the words. After a long moment, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small plastic bottle, the kind with a bubble wand inside. It was something he kept with him, not for cleaning or for work, but for his own daughter, Emma, who was now in college. When she was small and the world felt too big, he'd blow bubbles, and for some reason it helped. Made the world seem softer. Made her feel like things could still be okay. He opened the bottle, dipped the wand in, and blew gently. A line of shimmering bubbles floated toward the ceiling, catching what little light there was. The girl paused, her breath hitching. Another bubble floated past her, and she looked up, startled by its softness, its quiet magic. Then another. And another. She didn't smile, not yet. But she stopped crying. That was something. From the far end of the gym, behind a tinted glass window that overlooked the space, someone else was watching. She hadn't planned on staying at the school so long. In fact, she was supposed to be halfway across town at a board meeting, her driver already waiting outside. But something had made her pause when she'd passed the main office, a teacher mentioning a student who hadn't come out after dismissal. She didn't usually meddle in the day-to-day issues at her daughter's school, but this time, something felt different. So she stayed, quiet, curious, then stunned. The woman behind the glass was none other than Vanessa Rowe, the founder of a multi-billion-dollar tech firm, a single mother known for her cool efficiency and no-nonsense business presence. But what she saw now cut through every polished layer she wore. Her daughter, Lucy, was sitting behind the bleachers crying, and a janitor was blowing bubbles. Vanessa didn't move, didn't blink. She just stood there, her hand frozen on the window frame. Because it wasn't just that someone had found her daughter in a moment of distress. It was how he found her. No lecture, no questions, just presence, patience, and bubbles. Back on the gym floor, Alex still hadn't asked her anything. Instead, he looked at the girl gently. "Want to try?" he asked, offering the bottle. She looked unsure, like she wasn't used to kindness without a price. But she took it, carefully, slowly, and she blew her first bubble. It popped immediately, and she frowned. But he just chuckled. "Try again," he said with a grin. "It's all about breathing easy, not too fast." On her second try, a perfect little bubble floated toward the ceiling. She followed it with her eyes, and for the first time, a tiny smile touched the corners of her mouth. "What's your name?" he asked softly. She hesitated, then answered, "Lucy." "That's a nice name," he said. "I'm Alex." Behind the glass, Vanessa swallowed the lump rising in her throat. She had spent years trying to give her daughter everything she didn't have growing up. The best school, the best clothes, the safest car, the top security. But right now, none of that mattered. Her daughter wasn't crying because she lacked things. She was crying because something inside her hurt in a way no bank account could fix. And the man helping her wasn't a counselor, a teacher, or a therapist. He was the janitor. A janitor who didn't know he was being watched. A janitor who didn't know the girl he'd just comforted was the daughter of one of the richest women in the city. And he definitely didn't know that everything in his life was about to change because of what happened next. The moment was tender, pure. A man who had lost more than he ever spoke about, offering a small, simple act of comfort to a girl who felt invisible in a world filled with attention. But just as Lucy was about to speak again, the gym doors creaked open. Heavy footsteps echoed through the empty room. A sharp voice called out, "There you are, Lucy. What are you doing in here?" The moment broke like a popped bubble. Alex turned, startled, as Vanessa walked down from the viewing deck, heels echoing on the polished wood. Lucy's face shifted, a mix of relief and guilt. Alex stood up slowly, suddenly aware that whoever this woman was, she wasn't just another parent. She looked like someone important, someone powerful. But what she said next wasn't what he expected. Not at all. And with that single sentence, everything changed. Vanessa stopped a few feet from them, her eyes shifting between Alex and Lucy. Her expression was unreadable, part concern, part something else that Alex couldn't quite place. He straightened awkwardly, suddenly aware of the dirt smudged on his sleeves and the worn state of his boots. But Vanessa wasn't looking at him the way people usually did. Not like he was just the janitor. She looked thoughtful. "I've been looking everywhere for you," she said softly, kneeling in front of her daughter. Lucy clutched the bubble bottle tightly, eyes flicking nervously between her mom and Alex. "Are you okay?" Lucy hesitated, then gave a small nod. Vanessa glanced up at Alex. "Thank you for being here." Alex gave a polite shrug. "I didn't do much. Just found her crying. Thought the bubbles might help." There was a long pause. Vanessa looked like she wanted to say more, but didn't. Instead, she stood and reached for Lucy's hand. "Come on, sweetheart. Let's go home." As they walked away, Lucy turned back and gave Alex a small wave. He raised his hand in return, watching them disappear through the double doors. The gym was quiet again. But something about that encounter wouldn't leave him. It lingered in the air like the scent of soap after the mop had passed. Something unspoken. Something unfinished. Alex didn't know who the woman was. He had no idea her name was plastered across magazine covers and financial reports, or that she had a mansion in the hills and a chauffeur waiting outside. To him, she was just a worried mother, one who clearly had a complicated relationship with her daughter. But Vanessa knew exactly who Alex was now. And she couldn't stop thinking about what she'd seen. That night, she sat in her sleek, modern kitchen with her laptop open, ignoring the stack of investor reports beside her. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Something about that man. The way he looked at Lucy. Not with pity, not with judgment, but with simple human kindness. And something else, pain maybe. Like he'd seen storms of his own. She sipped her tea and stared out the window. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Lucy had gone straight to bed and hadn't said a word about what had happened. Vanessa didn't press. She never really knew how to ask without sounding like she was prying. That was the problem, wasn't it? She had built an empire, mastered strategy, understood risk, calculated everything, but her own daughter felt like a puzzle she couldn't solve. And now, this janitor, Alex, had managed to reach Lucy in a way Vanessa hadn't in months. She closed the laptop without typing anything. Something told her this wasn't the last time their paths would cross. Back in his modest apartment, Alex sat on the worn-out couch, flipping through an old photo album. Pictures of him and Emma, back when she was Lucy's age. There were snapshots of birthday cakes, trips to the park, bubble-blowing afternoons in the backyard. She had loved bubbles. Said they made everything feel lighter. He hadn't thought about those days in a long time. Emma was in college now, working 2 part-time jobs while studying to become a teacher. They talked often, but it wasn't the same. She was growing her own life, and Alex had always been proud of her for that. Still, he missed being needed. Missed those days when he was the center of someone's world. That's why seeing Lucy like that had shaken him a little. Not just because she was crying, but because of how familiar that sadness looked. He knew that feeling. The loneliness. The sense that you were holding too much for your age. He recognized it because he'd once seen it in his own daughter's eyes, after her mother left. And now here was this little girl, wrapped in silence and sadness, with a fancy coat and polished shoes but clearly carrying something much heavier. The next day, things returned to routine. Or at least they tried to. Alex went back to cleaning, moving through classrooms and halls with quiet focus. But word had gotten around. Teachers whispered that Vanessa Rowe had come in person to pick up her daughter, something she never did. And that she'd spoken to the janitor. Alex ignored the chatter. He didn't care much for attention. He'd taken this job not because it paid well, it didn't, but because it gave him peace. After years of trying to piece things together after his divorce, after struggling to make ends meet while raising Emma alone, this job had given him structure. But by lunch he noticed something odd. Lucy was back at school. And she wasn't with the other kids. She was sitting alone on the library steps, looking down at something in her hands. A teacher passed by, offering a half-hearted, "You okay, sweetie?" but didn't stop. Lucy didn't respond. Alex hesitated. He wasn't supposed to interact too much with the students. It wasn't in his job description. But rules never stopped him when someone looked like they needed a little bit of care. He made his way over slowly and crouched beside her, keeping a respectful distance. "Hey there," he said gently. Lucy looked up. Her eyes lit up for a second when she saw him. "Brought something for you," he said, holding out a small bottle of bubbles he'd picked up that morning. New one. Purple cap. Glittery label. Lucy took it with both hands like it was made of gold. "Thank you," she whispered. "You don't have to talk," he said. "Just figured you might want something to make the day a little softer." She nodded slowly, her fingers wrapping tightly around the bottle. As he stood up to leave, he felt someone watching. Not from the hallway. From the corner of the library. A shadow moved, then disappeared. He thought he saw a phone, someone snapping a picture. But when he looked again, the space was empty. A chill crawled up his spine. He told himself it was nothing. But later that evening, as Vanessa sat at her office desk, she received a photo via anonymous message. It showed Alex handing something to Lucy. The angle was strange. Almost sneaky. The message below read, "Do you know who's spending time with your daughter?" Vanessa stared at the image, heart pounding. She didn't know where it came from, or why someone would send it. But one thing was clear, someone was watching. And this simple moment, this janitor and her daughter, was no longer just a quiet accident. It was the beginning of something else entirely. The photo stayed on Vanessa's screen longer than she meant it to. She stared at it, her fingers tightening around her coffee cup. The image wasn't threatening on its own. Just Alex kneeling, handing Lucy the bottle of bubbles, but the caption beneath it unsettled her. The wording wasn't aggressive, but it had a shadow to it. Suggestion. A warning. And that didn't sit well with her. Vanessa wasn't the kind of woman who spooked easily. She had negotiated billion-dollar deals, stood toe-to-toe with CEOs twice her age, and held her ground in rooms full of men who didn't take her seriously. At least not until she opened her mouth. But this was different. This was personal. This was Lucy. And Lucy had already been through enough. She thought about deleting the message but decided to keep it. Just in case. Meanwhile, Alex tried to shake off the feeling that someone had been watching him. He went about his routine, scrubbing the cafeteria floors, wiping down whiteboards, collecting the day's trash. But the image of that dark corner in the library kept flashing in his mind. Felt too quiet. Too still. Later that week something changed. A new man showed up at the school. A security consultant, the principal called him. Said he was reviewing campus protocols. The guy was sharp, tall, always in a pressed suit and an earpiece. And he made a point of watching everyone. Especially Alex. At first, Alex thought he was imagining it. But the guy lingered near the janitor's closet. He trailed behind Alex during hall duties. He even showed up at the staff lounge while Alex was having coffee. He didn't say much, just offered polite smiles and asked vague questions like, "How long have you worked here? Or do you have kids of your own?" The way he asked didn't sit right. One afternoon, Alex found his supply closet slightly open. That never happened. He was careful about keeping it locked, ever since some kids had stolen toilet paper rolls as a prank. But today something was off. Nothing missing. Nothing moved. Just opened. Like someone had gone in and made sure he knew it. He didn't report it. He just locked the door tighter and went back to work. But a quiet tension began to settle into his shoulders. Something was shifting and he could feel it. Elsewhere, Lucy was becoming less withdrawn, though not exactly herself. She still didn't say much in class, still kept to herself during lunch, but she began looking for Alex in small ways. If she saw him wiping windows in the hall, she'd give a quick wave. Once, she left a tiny note inside his cart that said, "Thank you for the bubbles." She didn't sign it, but he knew it was her. It was written in purple marker, just like the bottle's label. At home, Vanessa noticed the change. Lucy was still guarded, still cautious, but she seemed a little more grounded, more present. Vanessa didn't push for details. She knew better than to corner her daughter with questions. But she did begin to wonder if maybe, just maybe, this janitor had done something she, with all her money and resources, hadn't been able to. She did her research. She had one of her assistants dig into Alex's background. Quietly. No red flags. Former carpenter. Divorced 10 years ago. No criminal record. Raised his daughter alone. Worked double shifts until she got into college. Took the janitor job to stay close to her tuition support office. All of it made sense. All of it was clean. But that didn't explain the photo. Who took it? Why send it? She didn't trust coincidences. In her world, everything meant something. And just as she began wondering if she was overreacting, another message came. This time it was a short video. Alex, alone in the break room, reading a letter. The angle was wrong. Too low. Too hidden. Like someone had placed a camera inside the room and left it recording. The footage ended abruptly, but the message was clear. Someone was keeping tabs on him. Vanessa leaned back in her chair, heart pounding. It wasn't about Alex anymore. It was about Lucy. Someone wanted her to pull away. Maybe from Alex. Maybe from the school. Maybe from something else entirely. But why? She didn't know who the threat was. Not yet. But she felt it. That night, as the city lights flickered outside his apartment, Alex opened a letter from Emma. It wasn't anything fancy. Just a folded piece of notebook paper with her handwriting across it. She had included a drawing she found from when she was little. It was a picture of them blowing bubbles in the park. She'd written, "Funny how the smallest things stick with us, right?" He smiled for the first time all week. But the smile faded quickly when he saw the envelope it came in. It was already opened. Torn at the corner. Like someone had slid a finger inside to peek. He checked his door. Windows too. But the paranoia had already started creeping in. Back at the school, the new security consultant asked the principal if he could quietly review staff access logs. He phrased it as standard safety procedures, but he only looked at one name, Alex Mason. Then he asked to see the camera feeds. Again, just for protocol. Vanessa met him that afternoon. "I didn't request private surveillance," she told him, voice calm but firm. The man smiled. "We're just making sure your daughter's safe, Ms. Rowe." Vanessa nodded slowly. "Good. Because if I find out someone is using my daughter as bait to settle a personal score, there will be consequences." The man said nothing. Just smiled again, this time more carefully. But Vanessa's instincts were screaming now. Someone was pulling strings. And it wasn't just about Alex. Something deeper was happening beneath the surface. She picked Lucy up herself the next day. Didn't send the driver. And when Lucy walked out of the front doors, she didn't run to her mother. She stopped beside Alex, who was sweeping near the sidewalk. "Did you get the note?" Lucy asked shyly. "I did," Alex smiled. "Made my whole day." Vanessa watched from the car, her fingers gripping the steering wheel. And not far away, across the street, inside a black SUV with tinted windows, someone else was watching too. Camera lens out. Still recording. Still waiting. The black SUV hadn't moved in over 20 minutes. Its engine idled softly, and the windows stayed dark, like eyes that watched without blinking. Vanessa noticed it immediately. Her instincts were too sharp to miss something like that. As Lucy climbed into the car, her face glowing from the short conversation with Alex, Vanessa barely managed a smile. She kept one eye on the rearview mirror, tracking the SUV as she pulled away from the curb. Back at home, she called her head of security. Quietly, firmly. "I need you to find out who's been assigned to that vehicle. No plates, no ID. It's been watching the school." The man didn't ask questions. He knew her tone well. She wasn't speculating. She was issuing a warning. Meanwhile, Alex was starting to feel the walls tighten around him. What had started as a small act of kindness now felt like it had opened a door into something he didn't understand. Each day, more eyes followed him. Faculty began treating him differently. Not directly, but with polite distance. He noticed a few staff members whispering near the copier, glancing his way and quickly turning back when he looked up. It was like the mood had shifted, and no one was saying why. The security man, the extra cameras, the sudden change in the principal's tone during their last hallway interaction, it all pointed to something being orchestrated behind the scenes. That afternoon, he found a folded note in his locker. It wasn't handwritten. It was type. No signature. Just 5 words. "Stop talking to the girl." He read it 3 times. His hands trembled. This wasn't about misunderstanding or caution anymore. This was a threat. Alex pocketed the note and walked out of the locker room slowly, trying to stay calm. But as he stepped into the hallway, he saw a familiar figure standing at the end of the corridor. Lucy. Alone again. The wave. Before he could respond, a teacher appeared and pulled her away with a forced smile, saying something about safety procedures. Lucy looked confused. Alex stood there frozen. Something inside him twisted. Vanessa received a report that evening from her head of security. The SUV was registered under a shell company, one that was recently linked to an aggressive private intelligence firm. The same firm her ex-husband had once hired during their custody battle years ago. Her blood ran cold. She hadn't heard from him in years. But if he was involved again... She opened an old drawer in her study and pulled out a faded manila folder. Inside were court documents, old emails, and transcripts of threats that had been dismissed at the time as frustrated parenting. But Vanessa remembered the tone behind those words. Her ex wasn't just bitter. He was dangerous when he felt powerless. And now, with Lucy growing older and more distant, maybe he'd seen an opening. Maybe he thought he could use this situation with Alex to turn things against her. She picked up the phone and called her attorney. "I need a protective review. Immediately." The next morning the SUV was gone, but something else took its place. A new staff member had been added to the school office roster. Friendly on the surface, but clearly planted. Vanessa didn't need to ask. She saw it in the way the woman greeted her. Too polished, too rehearsed. Someone was building a case. Or trying to. Vanessa knew they'd twist the janitor's kindness into something else. Something darker. And it wouldn't take much. Just the right angles, a few out-of-context photos, maybe a false report or two. The narrative would write itself. But she wasn't going to let that happen. She scheduled a private meeting with the principal, bringing in Lucy's counselor and the school board rep. She laid out the situation, calmly but directly, explaining what she believed was happening. The principal looked nervous but agreed to monitor things. Vanessa didn't reveal everything, only enough to put pressure on the system. She knew how to shift gears quietly, without making enemies until it mattered. Outside the school, Alex sat on a bench behind the gym, staring at the note he kept folded in his wallet. He hadn't shown it to anyone. He didn't want to cause trouble. But deep down, he knew staying silent was a mistake. Later that day, while finishing up in the art room, he noticed something strange. One of the student project folders had his name on it. Curious, he opened it. Inside were a handful of drawings, crayon sketches, clumsy but clear. One was of him blowing bubbles. Another showed Lucy smiling, sitting under a tree. And one more showed a tall man in a suit with dark glasses standing in the background, watching. He recognized the style, it was Lucy's. A quiet chill settled over him. Suddenly the intercom buzzed. "Mr. Mason, please report to the office." His stomach dropped. In the front office, 2 men in suits were waiting. Neither wore a school badge. One carried a thin black binder. The principal stood behind the counter, face pale. "Mr. Mason," one man said, not unkindly. "We'd like to speak to you in private. Just a few questions. About your interactions with one of our students." Alex's throat tightened. "Am I in trouble?" "No, not at all," the man said. But his eyes said something else. Vanessa's phone rang just as she was walking into her office. It was the school. "We have a situation," the principal said. "Alex Mason is being interviewed by external consultants. I wasn't fully informed until they arrived." Vanessa dropped her bag and turned around. "Tell them to stop. I'm on my way." But it was already happening. In the small room near the nurse's office, Alex sat across from the 2 men. They weren't shouting, weren't threatening, but their questions were sharp, calculated. Why did he talk to Lucy? Did he initiate the conversation? Did he give her anything? Was there contact outside school? Alex answered honestly, calmly, but his heart was pounding. Every word he said felt like it could be taken the wrong way. Then one of the men opened the black binder. Inside were photos. Dozens of them. Photos of Alex walking beside Lucy. Photos of him blowing bubbles in the gym. Photos of Lucy slipping the note into his cart. Some were grainy, taken from odd angles. Others were crystal clear. "Do you recognize these?" the man asked. Alex stared at the pages. His voice caught in his throat. He didn't know someone had been watching all along, recording everything. Then the man leaned forward. "There's a pattern here, Mr. Mason. We just need to understand your intentions." At that moment the door burst open. "Vanessa, what the hell is this?" she said, storming in. The room fell silent. Alex looked up, eyes wide. Vanessa's expression was sharp, focused, not on him but on the 2 men. "I didn't authorize this," she said. "And I'm pulling your clearance from this school. Immediately." She turned to Alex. "You're coming with me." The 2 men stood up, caught off guard. "We were told." "I don't care what you were told," Vanessa snapped. "He's done nothing wrong. If you want a lawsuit, keep talking." Alex sat frozen, unsure what was happening. But he stood when she nodded. As they walked out, the tension hung in the air like a wire pulled too tight. No one said it aloud, but they all knew it. This wasn't over. Not even close. Vanessa didn't speak until they were back in her car, the engine humming quietly beneath them. She kept her hands tightly wrapped around the steering wheel, knuckles pale. Alex sat beside her, silent, still stunned by everything that had just happened. The whole way. Photos. Questioning. He felt like the ground had shifted beneath him, and now he was floating in something he didn't understand. "I'm sorry," Vanessa finally said, her voice controlled but low. "That should never have happened." Alex turned to her slowly. "Why did it happen?" Vanessa hesitated. Then she sighed. "There's more going on here than I originally thought. And I think someone's trying to use you to get to me." He blinked. "What does that even mean?" She looked at him, and for the first time, her businesslike armor cracked just slightly. "My ex-husband. We've been in a quiet custody arrangement for years. No legal trouble recently, no contact for almost a year. But the moment you and Lucy connected, someone started watching. And that SUV, those photos, those are his style. Subtle pressure. Creating a narrative. Building a file. Alex leaned back, trying to absorb it. You think I'm part of some setup? I don't think you are, she said. But I think someone wants to make it look that way. Before he could ask more, her phone buzzed. Vanessa's eyes scanned the screen, and her jaw tightened. Then she handed the phone to Alex. You need to see this. It was a video link. A short clip already uploaded to a private account. The title was vague, but the thumbnail stopped him cold. It was him. In the hallway. Talking to Lucy. There was no audio, just grainy, slowed-down footage, edited to look suspicious. Like something out of a scandal documentary. It cut quickly between moments. Her handing him the note, him kneeling beside her near the gym, her reaching into his cart. It looked wrong. Very wrong. They're going to leak it, Vanessa said. Maybe to the media. Maybe to the school board first. Either way, they're laying a trap. Alex's voice cracked. But I haven't done anything. I know, she said quietly. But they're counting on the footage being louder than the truth. Outside, the clouds had gathered, thick and gray. A storm was coming, both in the sky and in their lives. Vanessa pulled over suddenly near a quiet overlook and cut the engine. Alex, I need to tell you something else, she said. Something I didn't want to get into unless I had to. He braced himself. Lucy's been seeing a therapist, she continued. And she recently started talking about a man who used to visit her daycare when she was very young. A man no one could identify. Alex frowned. What does that have to do with me? She described him as kind. Said he made her feel safe. That he gave her bubbles once. But she never remembered his name. Just said it felt like she knew him from a dream. He stared at her. I thought it was something her mind had created. Some way to cope. But then she met you, and the way she reacted. Alex's mind raced. That's not possible, he said. I've never seen her before. Vanessa nodded. I believe you. But I started thinking, what if the connection she feels isn't imagined? What if you were nearby years ago? At the same daycare, doing maintenance, filling in on a shift. Something small you didn't even remember. He tried to think back. There had been so many jobs after his divorce. Odd gigs, fill-ins, weekend shifts at places just to earn extra cash. He had done short-term maintenance at a children's center once. Painted murals, fixed a broken fence. His breath caught. There was a girl. Teeny. Quiet. Always alone at recess. He hadn't thought of her in years. Are you saying Lucy remembers me from back then? I'm saying, Vanessa said slowly, that someone may have uncovered that piece of your past and they're twisting it. Turning it into something ugly. Alex rubbed his face, heart pounding. All I did was blow bubbles to calm a scared little girl, he whispered. That's it. And that's why they're targeting you, she said. Because it worked. Because she trusts you. Just then Vanessa's phone buzzed again. This time it was her driver. They've called an emergency school board meeting, he said. About a staff member. Her eyes met Alex's. They're coming after your job. Alex looked out over the city lights below, mind racing. Then I need to fight back, he said quietly. Not just for me. For Lucy. Vanessa hesitated. If you fight this, it won't be quiet. It'll be public. You'll be painted however they need you to be. The truth might come out, but not before they try to ruin you. Alex nodded slowly. Then we get ahead of it. We tell the real story first. We take away their weapon. But before they could move, Vanessa's phone chimed one more time. This time it was a message from an unknown number. It read, He's not who you think he is. Dig deeper. Ask him about Rachel. Vanessa's hands froze. Alex went pale. She turned to him slowly. Who's Rachel? She asked. Alex's lips parted, but no sound came out. Then, after a long silence, he said just one word. Emma's mother. The air shifted. Vanessa stared at him, confused. Your ex-wife. Alex nodded, voice suddenly hoarse. She disappeared 10 years ago. I told people she left us. But that's not the whole story. Vanessa's eyes widened. You said you raised your daughter alone. I did, he whispered. But Rachel didn't walk away. She vanished. No goodbye. No note. No clue. And no one ever found out what really happened. Outside, thunder cracked in the distance. Inside the car, the silence between them deepened. Because now, the question wasn't just who was targeting Alex. The question was what happened all those years ago, and why it was coming back now. Ava stood motionless by the window of her office, heart racing, hands trembling slightly as she watched Jack through the surveillance screen one last time. Her breath caught when she saw him crouch beside Lila again. This time, not with bubbles, but with a simple drawing made of sidewalk chalk. A small sun, a smiling girl, and a balloon. The same image her late husband used to draw for Lila when she was scared. She hadn't told anyone about that. How did Jack know? The wind outside howled against the glass, as if echoing the storm inside her. She had made her choice, instructed her assistant to summon the school board, and now everything hung in balance. She picked up the photo on her desk, the only one that survived the fire from years ago. Her husband, holding Lila in one arm and blowing bubbles with the other. That memory, that moment, Jack had unknowingly recreated it in real life. And suddenly, she realized this wasn't a coincidence anymore. Downstairs, Jack waited nervously in the principal's office. He didn't know why he was called in. The silence in the room felt heavy. The principal sat stiffly, eyes flickering between the door and the clock, as if awaiting instructions. Jack's palms were sweaty. He clutched his cleaning gloves tightly. He had just calmed Lila down from what felt like a full-on breakdown. But now he was being summoned like he had done something wrong. He kept thinking about the girl. About the way her eyes had gone from stormy to soft, just from a bubble wand. About how she clung to his sleeve like she'd known him forever. He didn't know who she was really. No last name. No mention of her family. But something in her pain had felt too familiar. Jack had lost his wife in a car accident 3 years ago. His son had gone silent for months after that, refusing to speak. It took Jack months of trial and error to find the smallest things that brought his boy back. Chalk drawings, silly songs, and yes, bubbles. Jack stood up just as the door opened. Ava entered, composed but unreadable. She didn't acknowledge the principal. She looked directly at Jack, her gaze sharp but not cold. "Mr. Carson," she said softly. Jack nodded, unsure whether to sit back down or apologize for something he didn't know he'd done. "Yes, ma'am." Ava paused. Then, to everyone's surprise, she asked, "Could you take a walk with me?" He blinked. "Of course." They stepped outside into the breezeway, the wind now calmer, brushing leaves across the path. She walked in silence for a while before stopping under a tree where the chalk drawing was still visible. She looked at it, then at Jack. "That drawing," she said quietly. "How did you know?" Jack shrugged. "I didn't. I used to draw that for my son. It helped him when he was anxious." Ava's voice broke slightly. "My husband used to draw that exact picture for Lila." He turned toward her, eyes widening. "I lost him 3 years ago," she continued, eyes glassy. "Same year you lost your wife, apparently. I read your file." Jack's heart skipped. "You're Lila's. I'm her mother." She nodded slowly. "I've been watching her struggle for so long. Therapists, tutors, specialists. But none of them reached her. Until today." Jack shifted uncomfortably. "It wasn't anything special. I just listened." "No," Ava said, her voice firmer now. "It was everything. You did what no one else could." He didn't know what to say. But before he could respond, Ava pulled out a folded paper from her coat pocket. "There's something else," she said, handing it to him. Jack opened it. It was a legal notice. A document terminating his employment contract at the school. His chest tightened. "Oh, I'm fired." Ava shook her head slowly. "No, that's just the formality. You're no longer a janitor here. Because I want to offer you something else. He looked up confused. I own a private therapeutic arts center for children with emotional trauma, she explained. It's well-funded but lacking in what you have, a way with children. A heart that speaks their language. Jack stared stunned. You want me to work there? She smiled faintly. I want you to run the Child Connection program. Jack stepped back. I'm not a therapist. I'm just a dad. You're exactly what they need, Ava said. What my daughter needs. And there's one more thing. Before he could ask, the school intercom crackled overhead. Lila is asking for Mr. Jack. She's refusing to eat without him. Ava gave a small laugh through her tears. She hasn't asked for anyone since my husband passed. Jack was speechless. But as they walked back, something gnawed at him. As happy as the moment was, something didn't feel finished. A woman in the hallway, an older staff member, stepped back as they passed. She watched them with sharp eyes and quickly turned away. Jack noticed. So did Ava. But neither said a word. Later that night, as Jack tucked his own son in bed, he found a note slipped under his apartment door. No name. Just one sentence. She's not who she says she is. Be careful with the offer. Jack sat on the couch, staring at the note. The joy from earlier faded slightly. The pieces didn't all line up. Why had Ava been at the school that day? Why hadn't she come forward earlier as Lila's mother? And why did her assistant look startled when Jack mentioned the bubble drawing? As Jack held the note in one hand and the job offer in the other, he knew one thing. He had stepped into something far bigger than he thought. Lila was just the beginning. And someone somewhere didn't want this story to end with a happy job offer. Not yet. The days that followed the courtroom's decision were a strange mix of quiet relief and cautious hope. Life didn't shift overnight, but the weight on Aaron's chest had lifted in small, steady breaths. Amelia returned to school the following week, and though she still kept to herself, her shoulders no longer hunched quite so low. For the first time in a long while, she walked into class holding her father's hand, not hiding behind him. Clara didn't disappear either. She came by the school unannounced the next Friday, not with a chauffeur or assistant, but with a backpack and a pair of sneakers. She asked Amelia's teacher if she could take her to the park after school. They walked, just the two of them, and they didn't say much. But at one point, Clara bought her a bubble wand from a street vendor and tried to blow a bubble. It popped in her face. Amelia laughed. Clara laughed too. It was awkward, but it was real. Aaron stood from a distance, pretending to sweep fallen leaves along the sidewalk. His uniform still dusty. His cap still tilted just enough to shadow his face. But he watched, not in fear of losing her anymore, but with something deeper, recognition, maybe even gratitude. Whatever wall Clara had lived behind for so long, it seemed she was learning to step beyond it, brick by painful brick. Later that evening, Clara sat beside Aaron on a low cement bench near the playground. For a long while, they just watched Amelia run in circles, twirling, letting the bubbles float around her. Clara turned to Aaron and said softly, "I never imagined I'd see her smile like that again." He paused. "I never imagined I'd owe that to someone mopping floors." Aaron smiled gently. "Sometimes it's the people who've cleaned up enough messes who know how not to make more." She chuckled under her breath, then looked down at her hands. "I don't know how to make this right," she said. "Not just with Amelia, with you too. I treated you like less than human." Aaron shrugged lightly. "We all treat people based on what we're afraid of. You were afraid I was just another mistake. I was afraid of being seen as nothing more than one." Silence settled between them. Not awkward but thoughtful. Clara finally looked at him and asked, "Would you ever consider doing something different? Something more than cleaning?" He glanced at her, unsure if she meant it as pity or something else. "You offering me a job? I'm offering you a chance," she said. "My company's opening a community program, mentorship for kids who've lost a parent. You know what that's like. You've lived it. Maybe you can help them the way you helped Amelia." Aaron didn't respond right away. He looked toward the playground again, where his daughter had finally dropped to the grass, exhausted, cheeks flushed with joy. "I'll think about it," he said. And he did. Over the weeks that followed, he started attending meetings. Not to impress anyone but to understand. To learn how to channel his experience, his pain, his growth. He met kids who reminded him of Amelia in her quietest days. He sat across from mothers who were scared out of their minds and fathers who felt completely alone. And slowly, the janitor's mop was replaced by notebooks, lesson plans, and meaningful conversations. As for Clara, she became more present, not just in Amelia's life but in her own. She scaled back her travel, made school recitals and art shows a priority. She didn't try to buy her daughter's love anymore. She earned it in moments, in consistency, in effort. There were still arguments, of course. Still boundaries to rebuild and trust to re-earn. But the bubble had burst, and what floated from it was something new. Fragile, beautiful, full of light. One rainy afternoon months later, Amelia stood in front of her class during Hero Day. Each student had brought a picture or item that reminded them of someone who had made a difference in their life. Some had photos of athletes, others drawings of cartoon characters. Amelia held up a small bubble wand. "This belonged to my dad," she said softly. "He used to blow bubbles when I was scared. Not because he thought they'd fix anything, but because they helped me breathe." The room was quiet. Then the teacher asked gently, "Is he your hero?" Amelia smiled. "He is. But I also have another one now. Mum. She's learning how to blow bubbles too." That evening, as the family sat together for dinner at Aaron's modest apartment, now filled with handmade art, dishes set for 3 instead of 2, Clara looked around and said something she'd never said before. "I think this is the happiest meal I've had in years." Aaron raised a glass of lemonade and with a quiet grin said, "To unexpected family." Amelia giggled. "And unexpected bubbles." The laughter that followed wasn't forced or careful. It was messy and real. It was everything they'd fought through to earn. By the time the night ended and Amelia had curled into bed, Clara stood at the doorway, watching her sleep. "You know," she whispered to Aaron, "if someone had told me the man who calmed my daughter with bubbles would be the one to fix our broken hearts, I would have laughed them out of the room." Aaron smiled. Life has a funny way of surprising us. Outside, the rain had stopped, and the street lamp flickered through the window. And somewhere inside them both, something settled. Not just peace but purpose. Not just resolution but hope. Because sometimes heroes don't wear capes. Sometimes they wear worn-out sneakers and carry a bubble wand in their pocket. And sometimes healing begins with the smallest gesture, noticed by the one person who needed to see it most. The story of a single dad janitor and a billionaire mother wasn't just about status or money or second chances. It was about love. Unlikely, complicated, enduring love. And the little girl who brought them both back to life.